Hey everyone, once again we are back at my sister's house for another book haul. This time is the fantasy book haul that I promised before. The first one is a book that I need to read because it's an arc that I received, an e-arc that I got on NetGalley. I never read it, but I did end up buying it just because I realized it was a small press and I was so in love with this artwork. Just like the cover artwork is so gorgeous. Part of the illustration of this book is a limited edition, what I think the first round was. I'm not sure how much of it's still available, but it's supposed to be a set of like retellings of, classic fairy tales. It's called Once Upon a Time, and it is edited by, honestly there's no names here on editing. It doesn't have an editor. That's weird. But it has a series of authors, none of which I am familiar with. It's a small press, and I ended up buying it just because it's such a gorgeous artwork, honestly, that I really want to do it. I need to read it. I know that. It's one of those arcs that I have to get to hopefully this year, but it's nice to have it on hand now to refer to. I don't know what to expect here, but like adult fairy tales can be fun. I tend to like fairy tales, even when the writing's not that great. So I'm hoping that will hook me in well enough to keep me going. But hopefully, obviously, I want it to be top tier. That's always what I want. It's always what I'm hoping for. Next is a book that I've heard great things about, an author who I've really enjoyed, but it is an edition that I do not love, and that is Who Fears Death by Addie. And I'm just really excited with this because right now I've only read a few of her works, which all are science fiction. I read the Binti series and I read her new middle grade book that came out last year, I think, about a little boy who gets superhero powers. But this is fantasy. This is, I think, fantasy. Obviously, it's in this haul. So it's fantasy about a girl, a woman, or a girl, I'm not sure, who is either death or is connected to death. And I think it's tangentially related to one of the stories. So maybe she is death. Anyways, I'm going on tangents. My point is that I love death. I don't love death. I love the idea of having a character who focuses on death and where explores death. And I love the idea of seeing her work explored in fantasy. I should also clarify, Dr. Addie is a doctor. She has a doctorate. So I probably should start referring to her as that. I'm just used to authors who have doctorates, putting that on the title. So I don't always think about it, but she has a doctorate. I think it's in biology, and there's nothing I admire more than an author in science fiction and fantasy who has a background in science, a high level background in science. A good author who has an expertise in science. The two coming together have such amazing potential, and that's why I really like her work and why I'm excited to get to more of her work, for that matter. Sorry, I have limited time to film and I wanted one of these, so I'm doing both at the same time. Next is a book that I don't remember why I bought this, but I don't remember where I heard it. I want to say I first read it from Books and La, but I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it in general. That is Silver in the Wood. I know it's a novella. I love novellas because there's so much potential in them. Let's just see what the back says. There was a wild man who lives in the deep quiet of a green hollow, and he listens to the wood. Tobias, tethered to the forest, does not dwell on his past life, but he lives a perfectly unremarkable existence with his cottage, his cat, and his dryads. So we're talking about some fantasy, some mythology, science in there, and it sounds like this person is a guy who is trapped as a tree or something. I'm not sure, but I find that premise extremely intriguing, and I'm excited to get to it. I mean, I feel like I had the same generic shit to say, which is I'm excited to get to it. I'm excited to get to it. Of course you are, Josh. That's why you're talking about it. Jesus. Let us continue. Next is a title I'm not sure how to say. Oh, actually, it's not hard. Ormshadow by Priya Sharma, and this is a dark fantasy novel. All I know, but I'm psyched. I don't think this is one I've heard a lot about, but I think it was one that I found when I was looking for great fantasy novellas. It's kind of a thick novella, just so constituted novella, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Acclaimed author Priya Sharma transports readers back in time with Ormshadow, a coming-of-age story as dark and rich as a good soil. Burning with resentment and intrigue, this fantastical family drama invites readers to dig up the secrets of the Bellman family and wonder whether myths and legends are real enough to answer for a history of sin. Boom, boom, boom. That's good for me. A family. Who doesn't love a good family drama? Mixed in with some nice and dark fantasy. Yes, yes, yes. I'm here for this. Next up, we have the wonderful and the amazing Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. And this is one that I think came out last year. I want to say it won the Hugo, maybe up for Hugo. Her second one came out this year as well. And I ended up buying this late last year because I knew I wanted to read it. Will I get to it this year? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have bought it right away. But I just heard so many great things about it. And I know it was eligible for top tier awards. And it's in a genre that I love. So I couldn't not explore it. I want to say it might be queer too. Let's explore it together. A young royal from the far north is sent south for a political marriage in an empire reminiscent of imperial China. Her brothers are dead, her armies and their war mammoths long defeated and caged behind their borders. Alone and sometimes reviled, she must choose her allies carefully. Okay. So we have a royal individual married off for political reasons. So it's a political fantasy. I'm here for it. And honestly, I would, if this was a bigger book, I'd be intimidated, which I am still somewhat intimidated by that. I'm always intimidated by like a truly unique world building. But I find, I can't turn my one hand. I find thin novellas, like the small novellas, are easier for me to, like they're intended to be like a quick introduction to the world. And I find that easier than like a big swallowable book like Brandon Sanderson. Next is a collection of stories. It's an anthology of fantasy stories. The Mythic Dream, edited by Dominique Parison and Nava Wolf. And these are stories that are featuring Sean McGuire, Naomi Novik, Carmen Maria Machado, Rebecca Roanhorse, and many, many more. If that list of names is enough to get you intrigued, how about this fucking cover? So gorgeous. Why did I buy this? I mean, because I'm interested, obviously. It was a stupid question. What I meant to say was, I had the other book by this duo of editors called Robots and Fairies, which I still haven't read. I told myself I would last year, but it's on audio, so I'm slow to get to it. But I love the cover and I love the premise so much that I had to get it. And then I saw this one, like the newest one, and I know it's on audio. I was like, okay, yes, I'll try this one. It's also just so gorgeous, I couldn't say no to it. But I still need to read the other one first, honestly. There's a reason I'm not buying any books this year, but here we are. Now I have 2 books I'm excited to get to. At least now, every time I look at my bookshelf, I have a little bit of happiness. That's what books are, right? It's how you buy happiness. It's not true, I know that. Next is a book by Mohsin Hamid, and it is Exit West. This is I want to say magical realism or just contemporary fantasy book. I think it has to do with something to do with mental health, maybe loss or death. I think it's supposed to be emotionally impactful. I don't remember anything about any of these books pretty much, but I remember the feeling I had, and I had a very strong feeling about this book for a long time before I bought it. And so I think this is one that really stood out to me for whatever reason as something that the premise when I originally read it as something I really wanted to get to. In a country teetering on the brink of civil war, 2 young people meet, sensual and fiercely independent, Nadia and gentle restrained Saeed. They embark on a furtive love affair and are soon cloistered in a premature intimacy by the unrest rolling their city. When it explodes, turning familiar streets into a patchwork of checkpoints, they begin to hear whispers about the doors that can whisk people away, if perilously and for a price. I'm gonna stop there. Yes, I love portal fantasies. Maybe that's where I got this from. Maybe I was looking for portal fantasies and this book came up. That would make sense why I was so excited. One of my favorite things in fantasy, in anything, are portal fantasies. There's a reason my favorite series is the LaRue Children's series, on top of the fact that it's Sean McGuire. But still, I'll add that into like the underlying premise here, and I'm really excited, not just by the theme that we get to use in this book, but by how it's going to explore the world, the emotional impact, and the societal impact of where this book is set. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say I'm excited, but I am very energized in a positive manner. And we have ourselves another lovely anthology. This time edited by Ellen Datlow and Terry Datlow. Is that their name? No, actually it's edited just by Ellen Datlow. The point is, this is a fantasy anthology. I want to say of young adult retellings or sort of fantasy stories set in a fairy realm. Oh, well, they're not, damn it. I do have a book set in the fairy realm. This is not that one. This is a different one. I should just read the goddamn cover before I start explaining things. Tales of Wonder in an Imagination. Cat Stories, edited by Ellen Datlow. And this has stories from Susanna Clarke, Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates, George R. R. Martin, Neil Gaiman, and many others. I do like cats, but I don't know if I feel like I had to have this. Pretty sure this is fantasy and that it's going to deal with cats. I don't know what to expect from this. Nevertheless, I trust Ellen Datlow to give me a fun ride. Next, we have a book that I've heard mixed reviews about, but nevertheless, I am energetically enthused about it. And that is Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. And I have several of the books, at least one of the books by Marlon James, and I've heard great things about his writing. It says myth, fantasy, and history merge in the stunning novel following a mercenary in his search for a missing child. I've heard it's just like, his take on epic fantasy. I've heard mixed takes on it, but you know, I don't always love epic fantasy or high fantasy as it stands, so if it's something different, maybe it'll work for me. I've heard enough about it to want to give it a try. It looks thin, but it's actually over 600 pages. Pages are very thin, so it's deceptive. Next is a book that most people have heard about, probably The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I wasn't going to get this. I didn't want to get this, but the hype called to me, and I couldn't not. A woman cursed with everlasting life and explores life with her. I heard some criticism because there's no representation in this book. It's just very white, which is definitely the safe thing to do if you don't want to put in the work for representation. I think it will probably hinder the book, but the premise is still exciting enough to want to give it a try. I never love V.E. Schwab, but I've really liked the premises enough to enjoy the ride. Like I've read Vicious, which I thoroughly enjoy, but I didn't love it. And then her other book, The Magic One, The Darker Shades of Magic. I didn't like the first one, but I still want to give the second one a try. But I've heard enough praise about this that I want to give it a go. Next is a book that I am more excited about, and that is Alice Hoffman's Practical Magic, which is what the movie's based off of. And I haven't seen the movie. I just know it's about a bunch of witches, modern day. The Owen sisters confront the challenges of life and love in this bewitching novel from best-selling author Alice Hoffman. For more than 200 decades, the Owens women have been blamed for everything that has been gone wrong in their Massachusetts town. Jillian and Sally have endured that fate as well. As children, their sisters were forever outsiders, taunted, talked about, pointed out. The elderly aunts always seemed to encourage the whispers. But Jillian and Sally wanted to escape. One will do so by marrying, the other will do so by running away. But the bonds they share will bring them back, almost by magic. Not at all what I thought. I thought they were going to be witches. This sounds much more domestic. I don't know where the magic comes in. Kind of disappointed by that, but I love the cover. I also do not love that book of the month. Give me this shitty copy. And lastly, we have one of my last book of the month buys before I cancel my subscription. I had to stop buying books. And that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Celia Morano Garcia. And I thoroughly enjoyed her gothic horror story last year. Didn't love it, but I liked it. And I'm excited to give this one a try. He does such a variety of things, and I love it when authors do that. So I'm excited to give this sort of mythological fantasy a try, because I've already said I like fantasy that is mythological. Love me some mythology gods, especially when it delves into mythology that I don't know very well. It is basically anything that isn't Greek or Roman. And these are all the fantasy books that I will be hauling. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you made it this far in the video, why don't you give me a picture of cats so you remember of this book. As always, have a great day and stay safe.